Greetings, salutations, and welcome to the Kreeger cast. I'm your host, Patrick Kreeger, and I'm joined once again by Emma.
Hey! Welcome to my world now.
So today, we are going to be doing a free-range podcast, but we're going to try to limit it to the discussion of murder mysteries and other creepy, spooky things on YouTube/podcasts.
So like true crime in general, with a little here and there when it comes to spookiness.
So not just true crime.
Extraterrestrial stuff? Are we going to bring up any of that?
We could do that. I'm thinking about, there's a few YouTubers that I want to talk about that if you don't know about, you should. But they might not be fully up your alley because their videos are a little on the shorter side. Got it. So, let's talk about the bigger ones first. Let's talk about Last Podcast on the Left.
Oh god. So, these guys are my favorite. They have a great back and forth, and it's all because of their friendship, I think, and just because they're so, they just shoot the shit all the time, and they don't care what they say to each other because they know wholeheartedly that they're not trying to hurt anyone. And the nice thing that I like about them is they usually have their podcasts about these criminals or these murderers or these events after the person who committed these acts has departed. So they're not making anyone famous, usually. Not that they would be making anyone famous who's a murderer, but when you're a true crime fanatic, these people kind of become famous in your own mind. Not saying that, you're, sending letters to them or love notes or whatever, but you definitely have respect for how they committed these crimes, in the way that you can only be deadly logically respect these people. But in any other circumstances are disgusted with them as human beings. Because they are murderers and they do horrible things.
Well, I'm glad we can agree on that.
Yes, definitely. I hope everyone can. As long as it's not something where it was like completely mental illness. For example, if we're talking about the beheading on the bus in Canada, and I know that you true crime people know exactly what I'm talking about, that was mostly mental illness above anything else. And after that event, he was taken into a mental hospital to, kind of keep him sane for the time being, and the medication worked out for him, and now he's walking the streets after beheading a guy in a bus. Only in Canada.
Yeah.
But it's also a very sad story because knowing that this was created by mental illness, he does have to live with the fact for the rest of his life that he did kill someone in front of other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually, not for that.
Yeah, of course, no one should be.
I meant, even if it was a mental illness state,
I think that
doesn't
you need to be,
you.
Yeah. I think, and everyone has different opinions about this, and it's all okay, but I'm for, if you are fully within your mind's, abilities and you don't have any mental illness and you do kill someone, death penalty. Rape, goodbye. But when it comes to something where there's mental illness and there's character flaws on top of that, I think you definitely have to balance how bad it was. For example, if it's Jeffrey Dahmer, get the hell out of here. But if it's something like Ed Gein, yes, they treated him very nicely, and he did kill 2 women. So there's this side of he should go to jail, but there's also this side of, well, he went to the graveyard 44 times, and I think he ended up unburying about 7 of those 7 times 7 bodies. I think he has about 9 total people.
Oh, I thought it was a lot more than that.
No, I think it's just 9.
You would know better than I.
Sounds more because he had so many body parts just laying around his house. When you see these crime scene photos of people walking in, most of the floor was just a thick layer of wax and oil from the bodies that had just been lying around, or food. This guy would not clean, would not pick up after himself. His mother, who had died years before, he had closed off her room. So everything was nice in there, but the rest of the house that he was wandering in was his domain, and he would not clean it. So it was just oil, old blood, the smell of rotting flesh and garbage. Just disgusting. And that's why it's so scary, too, is that all this kind of stuff is not being done in this clean room like you would see Dexter. It's gross and dirty, which I think also adds a certain amount of horror to it, because as a germaphobe, I'm sure that you could relate to that being a scary situation for yourself. Though I'm sure it's way beyond, I'm going to be killed right now, but the way that he murdered these women was they didn't know they were about to be shot. They were working in their regular lives, and they were shot from behind execution style. With one of them. I'm not sure about the other one, so... Because you know me, I have a bunch of facts that are, like, almost exact, and then I have a bunch of things that I know about, and I can describe them, but I have no idea what they're called. Yeah. So I'm kind of a weird bank vault of facts that you kind of have to puzzle piece together sometimes. I mean, that's just my brain. Blame it on me being dropped on my head 3 times as a child, whatever. Or my blondness. Either way.
So, we haven't described what Last Podcast on the Left is.
Oh, well, it's a crime podcast, and it's a very, I would call it black humor podcast, where they make fun of these murderers, or they'll be talking about people. For example, there's a woman last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, who is trying to sue Beyonce for killing her cat because she believes that she dances too sexually and therefore is hypnotizing her, and that somehow also came into having her cat killed by Beyonce. There are some weird people out there, but man, do they say some funny things about this woman that are politically incorrect, but man, it's good.
Cat killed by Beyonce, unless she ran over it with her car or something of that nature.
Sexually dancing hypnotically.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it goes from people trying to sue Beyonce because they think she's a sexy ghost to
what?
Ed Gein. Yeah.
I didn't get the concept of her being a ghost.
Not a ghost, but like a spirit that's taken over her life, kind of thing. Yeah.
Like a demon or something like that.
Yeah, like that's inhabiting her life and ruining it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're available on YouTube, and they're available just as Last Podcast on the Left.
Yes, they have their own network as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
And then with the other podcast we're going to talk about, which is also about true crime, specifically murder, and also called That Fuck Word Show, is My Favorite Murder, also known as Murderinos, the people that follow it.
Yeah.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, I don't know why I keep calling the podcast Murderinos, but I do.
Well, it's probably because many of your friends are Murderinos. I mean, I'm sure Brooke isn't, but I mean, part of her has to be with her job. I mean, when you're seeing dead people in a trailer at 2 a.m. in the middle of the woods, and someone's trying to break his body down so that he can give him CPR, I'm sure some of your mind has to be a little bit in the true crime world.
I suppose. I actually literally only know 2 people.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, at least Brooke's one of your close friends, so it's not, too distant from you.
Oh, I actually wouldn't say Brooke is.
Really?
I don't know. I'm saying that of the people I know, there's only 2.
Okay, who's the other one?
We'll talk about that later.
Well, damn, are you secretly a murderer? Is this just a setup for me? The whole time? The whole podcast?
Great, the second guest to make that joke.
Well, that's how you know you're friends.
It's the third person to make that
third person?
Yeah.
Well, at least it just means that you're so elusively nice that nobody could ever, think that you committed murder, but you definitely have the means of committing murder. I think it's a mixture of those 2 things.
I think. No,
I mean, the cabin in Washington would be a fabulous dumping area.
I suppose. But anyway. So, My Favorite Murderer. Let's talk about that.
My Favorite Murder?
Isn't it My Favorite Murderer?
No, My Favorite Murder.
Oh, huh. Hence, I remembered them making a joke about that people keep calling it My Favorite Murderer. But I'm like, isn't that the name of the show?
Oh,
but
it's
that
the same thing with
the
my
joke.
dad, though. He always almost says that El Ranchito is Margaritaville, and we'll start singing the song, making fun of him for telling us that it was Margaritaville the whole time we were driving to this restaurant and singing it in the car.
Margaritaville is a restaurant, though. There's
Yes.
just not many of them.
But we don't have any near us, and we know what actual restaurant it is. So
the nearest one, I think,
especially that there's a song that goes along with it.
True.
Helps.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a kid and, you love making fun of your parents because you feel that's some sort of power about you if you can get them.
Drifting Away to El Ranchito.
Yes.
That famous Jimmy Buffett song. Anyway, I also love that this is the second time Jimmy Buffett has come up, but that's beside the point.
Okay, 3s and 2s here. All right.
Okay. So
let's make some firsts.
My favorite murder is two women, right?
Yes.
And they have a dialogue normally where one of them's teaching the other about a murder, from what I've seen.
Yes. So their thing is they basically research what they're going to talk about the next day, the night before, and they let their quote unquote recorder guy / intern, the amazing Steven, listen to these ideas, and he says yes or no to them depending on if the other woman chose that crime to talk about for the podcast for that night. So whoever left off first last time now goes second, and vice versa.
I actually didn't pick up on that in the few podcasts of theirs that I listened to.
Well, they both have amazingly beautiful voices, but it is really hard to tell who's at first.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a visual.
True, yeah.
I think
can't
it might
picture,
be easy to tell the guys apart just because their voices come at very different octaves. And they have different characters to their voices.
Some of them are easier to tell. There's two of them that I have a hard time telling apart, and I can't tell which.
I think I can definitely tell Ben apart from Henry. Because Henry's crazy alien man! And then you have Ben, Mr. Politician / Fakenstein, talking. And, he's really kind of ties the two together. And he's kind of like the linchpin for the other members. Yeah, he's a cool guy. He reposted my art, so of course I have to say something nice about him besides that he's a nice guy. And that he always takes pictures of his puffin picture. Oh my gosh. So every time he gets art of his dog that fans send in, he'll take a picture of it and upload it on his site.
Okay.
Yeah, he's super nice like that. I really like when people appreciate their fans.
Yeah, fan art is a big deal. The one that I'm always shocked about is the Report of the Week gets fan art.
What is the Report of the Week? Tell me about this.
Oh, another thing that comes up in most every podcast. He's a rather thin, pale fellow who wears a suit, who reviews fast food.
Is this guy we're talking about where they have like 20 pictures of his face starting his video and it all is the same?
Yes, and actually that's a running gag with him, is he's trying to see how perfect he can do that each and every time. That's a thing he's trying to do.
Okay, I'm making sure it's that same YouTuber, because remember, names, descriptions, got the descriptions, don't know the name.
So, the Report of the Week gets a lot of fan art, and it's interesting. Like, people draw him a lot.
So do they take certain segments that they think are funny and do, like, little comic strips, or there'll be a scene that he talks about and they kind of create it? Very
rarely. Typically, it's them putting him in a film noir scene, because he it's funny because like his passion for dressing is like very 80s 90s, but his passion in terms of like history and stuff is like 30s and 40s, so people put him in film noir scenes and it's funny. But that's beside the point. We're on spooky, scary Spooktober podcast.
When you said 30s, it reminded me that Batman was created in the 30s.
Yes, so was Superman.
Spoopy Batman at first. First he was a criminal. And then he was like, oh, let me mess with these rich people, and now I'm the good guy. And you got the whole background as to why, he would smoke bomb a bunch of rich people on a mayoral dinner. But you figure out why later on. It's a good intro to Batman, I must say.
Detectives Comics #1, or was it 34?
I'm not quite sure.
It doesn't matter. Anyway. So
you
yes.
say that now. Wait till the commenters start getting on your ass about that.
We've gotten 3 comments so far.
People could be going back to this episode just to say that they listen to all of your podcasts if this ever becomes famous.
Well, that's true.
Or just to do it for the point of it, which I know you do a lot.
Yeah, I love going through people's back catalogs. It's kind of hilarious. And it's kind of cool to see how they've grown.
Oh, definitely.
And you can actually already see that on this channel. If you watch some of the earlier stuff, it sounds terrible. And it's been getting better and better. Anyway, that's beside the point again. So yeah, last podcast on the left. What is their format like?
So their format is usually it's one person who's an expert on that information. For example, if you're going to be doing an alien episode, that would obviously go to Henry. But if you're doing something more about murder, then it would probably go to Marcus. And then if it's kind of something in between, or he usually is just kind of the glue that brings the conversation on further, it's usually Ben. But I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've heard him do an episode, but he might also be doing the murder episodes as well. Okay. I listen to them randomly in stints. For example, yesterday I listened to murderer Dennis Nielsen, UK's top killer. He killed 15 men. Wow. And this was back in the 70s.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's harder and harder to get away with that stuff, luckily.
Especially when you hear about ear. And we were talking about ear earlier in the podcast before this one, I guess you would say? Or
the previous podcast you were on.
Okay, perfect. About how DNA caught someone who had, I'm going to have to look it up, but I think he had 55 victims.
Oh my God.
In California. Both being rape and murder victims.
Yeah.
And the creepy thing is, one actually happened nearby Huntington. One was in Irvine. I'm not sure if there's a Huntington one of his, but I know that I go past one of the murder sites, I think, every other day, on the weekdays. It's very weird to think of. Because everything is so normal now, and there's not a murderer running around that I know of.
That we know of.
Yeah. That we know of. So it's interesting to see something so commonplace turn into, this horrifying thing. And it's kind of also nice that there's no, memorial thing there that you can see from far off, and you could only really go up there to pay respects. Otherwise, it would become, this big, oh, look, someone was killed here, blah, 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 and kids would hang out and ruin the place, and just, you don't want to desecrate a memory like that when it's already an upsetting thing.
Yeah, it's actually something that, there's a great documentary that's probably on YouTube now. It was on Netflix and was taken off. It was called, I want to say it was The Fascination with Murder, or The Fascination with the Flame. It had a kind of an artsy name, but the point was people who fanboy over murderers. And in
what way? In the good way where they're okay, we're learning more about criminology, we're learning more about mental illness, we're learning more about the setup to why people do this, McDonald's triad, all of that, or
everything. It was like a 3-hour documentary, so they try to cover as much as possible. They talked about murderabilia, which is weird that there's a word for that, but I guess it makes sense.
I've never heard that phrase. I usually hear trophy.
No.
This is different from a trophy.
Well, so murderabilia is some of the best examples of it are Ed Gein's cookware. That floats around.
Okay, so it's a trophy that has been turned into a commonplace household item.
No, it's just something that's connected to the murderer or the murderers. So a good example probably that would get the point across a little clearer is this murder site you're talking about, people coming and taking dirt from it to sell.
I see.
That dirt would be murderabilia.
Got it. Okay, I know what you're talking about.
It's people collect that sort of stuff.
Speaking of that subject matter, there's actually one that you might really want to know that's talking about this. And what was the word again?
Murderabilia.
Murderabilia. So, there was a woman for many years who was in contact with Manson, and, basically she tried to get him to marry her so that upon his death, she and her boyfriend could take his body around the United States and sell tickets to look at his dead body.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
I mean,
that was a thing
creepy,
that
but that's,
possibly could have illegally happened, but sadly did not. Not sadly, like, I'm glad nobody can worship his dead corpse, but at the same time, like, leftover anger, I guess, from the things that he did, because there are still people living that went through what he did to them. So,
the only things that really stuck with me from that podcast was this, or that documentary, was this guy who is like the world's foremost distributor of murderabilia.
Interesting.
He lives in Florida, and he travels all around the world to get like rocks and dirt and stuff from different murder sites and pieces of clothing from murderers.
I feel so bad for the people who own Keen's old property now. Because I know they had to buy at some point 3 different fences spaced out so that people couldn't get to the place where his house used to be.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, is he goes around the world collecting this stuff and goes to police auctions all the time.
Does he do this properly and well-mannered, or does he do anything that he needs to do to get these objects?
From the documentary, it seemed like he was doing everything above board. It was
but
creepy,
it's also
but it was
like a documentary, so you don't know what they cut out. You never know.
You also don't know what
he didn't say. But we can assume that they're good from this documentary.
Yeah. The guy seemed on the up and up, and he didn't seem crazy or anything like that. He just seemed like, hell, no one else is doing this, so I might as well do it. And this is what I do. Yeah. It's, if I remember correctly, it started because he lived in an area where there was a bunch of murders.
Was this in Wisconsin or Northern California?
No, this was in Florida.
Yep. You can add that in there too for murder capitals in the United States.
And he noticed people coming and taking sand from like a neighbor's yard, and he goes, "Why?" And he goes, "Because there was a murder there." And he was like, "That's weird." So he started going down that route. And
what are some of the most famous objects that he's had on him?
I can't remember because it was a couple times. It was a while ago since I saw this, but the crux of it was he was trying to buy. There's a famous police sketch of a murderer or bomber or something where the guy wears a hoodie and has big aviator glasses.
Yeah.
The hoodie and aviator glasses were coming up for auction. And he went to that auction.
Are you talking about the Unabomber?
I think so.
Because that's usually what his thing was. Yeah.
That's why I said or bomber, because I thought it was the Unabomber. But anyway, so he went to that auction, and I can't remember if he ended up getting it or not.
Okay.
Because he was going to get it to resell it.
Okay.
But
how much can you really kick a resale value on something that's already worth so much?
Well, that's the thing is, like...
Because it's the only attainable thing, pretty much?
I don't know.
Because I wonder if the bomb components are up for sale. Just of course not all together, but fragments of them.
That I would doubt.
Because it's probably still has to be in a box somewhere as evidence, just in case they need to go look back at anything.
Very rarely do murder weapons, and I would include bombs on that, come up for sale ever.
But I was thinking if they missed anything at the house that was shrapnel from the bomb.
That's possible. But, like, you don't see stuff from the Columbia coming up for sale. And I'm sure there's tons of that around the desert.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm sure there's still tons of it out in the desert, sadly.
And I'm sure it's one of those things, again, where they're just like, we just don't want people to have the ability to make bombs normally, so let's just not give them...
Well, there's a lot of respect there, like, with the guy who built the Killdozer.
Yes.
Like, that was a big thing about how to destroy the Killdozer.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you want to get real conspiratorial, what happened to all the Totengeld, the death gold from the Holocaust?
Yep.
I have a pretty good theory as to where that went. But that, dear listener, is another show.
Does it have anything to do with a ship transporting it to the boys in Brazil?
I know where the death gold went. I legitimately know where it went, and I have a paper trail to prove it. And I see how the governments try to cover it up. Now, of course, I don't know where all of it went. But I know where a large portion of it went. And I can definitively say, yes, this is where...
It was at some point? Or where it is currently?
So, again, I don't want to get into this too much on this particular podcast, but it is the last place it could be as a group. So once it hit this point, once it went to this place, it was distributed around the world in jewelry and other things.
Got it.
And no, dear listener, it is not Switzerland. Okay. Yeah. So we'll talk about that after the podcast.
Spoopy. We're going back to Spoopy.
Yeah, we're going back to Spoopy. So, true crime podcasts. There's also other true crime YouTubers.
Yes.
I, for as much as I hate most of their stuff, and if by chance one of my friends is listening, no, I do like your stuff on BuzzFeed. You're one of the exceptions to this. But I hate most of the stuff BuzzFeed puts out. But there's this one thing that one of my friends works on that I do like, that I don't want to say here for reasons.
Like I know some people that I follow on Instagram all the time that work for BuzzFeed as comic artists, or they work for like animating GIFs or whatever, but they work freelance. They don't work directly for them. Yeah.
My friend runs one of the divisions of BuzzFeed.
Got it.
Anyway, I really love their Unsolved series. And
I know, and I swear it has to do all with their chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
It's 100%. They just happen to have a great chemistry for this kind of work.
Shane and Ryan are fantastic, and if you don't know about BuzzFeed Unsolved, go now and watch both their true crime series as well as their paranormal series. I don't particularly like the sports thing that's going on, but I also don't care about sports.
So they've also created a new offshoot that you might want to look at called Ruining History. Have you seen that?
No, but it doesn't sound like something I would actually like.
Okay, but they're talking about the world's most horrible popes, things like the whale that influenced, the White Whale novel?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is that called again?
Moby Dick?
Moby Dick, yes. So things like that, where it's like bad history of bad people, and they just go around making fun of them or going, oh, that wasn't that bad for that time. Like, come on.
Well, as it pertains to Spooktober, they've done a lot, and one of my favorite things about their ghost show is it is what a true ghost should be.
Where you have someone who's against it and someone who's totally believes in it.
And never finds anything.
Exactly.
As someone who does not believe in the paranormal, it's a ghost show should always end boringly.
And I feel it's also nice because you have someone who believes it and someone who's picking out words from the machine, from the static. And so you can take either way, and you don't feel like you're being bullied either way to
That's true.
Conform to whatever side, because they both respect each other and will joke around with each other, so you know whatever their feelings are about this this subject matter, that they don't take it personally, and therefore you can feel whatever way you want to.
True. And there's so much fun to be had.
Yes.
In their episodes. They're funny, they're educational. Sometimes they do get facts wrong, but that's a rarity. I've only ever caught them doing things wrong like twice.
Plus, in most true crime shows, there's going to be very different novelizations and biographies where some of these people will make up new information or bring up old information that might be true, but until they find the evidence, nobody knows. So you pretty much have to go back and forth doing corrections on some episode that might have been done 50 weeks ago, but there's new relevant information about the case, and because you have your true crime fans, you have to, of course, update them, because that's the world that you're living in.
It's funny, dear listener, something that you don't know is that I've recorded the same podcast 4 times in a row and never was particularly happy with it. And the subject of that podcast is being wrong on the internet and how you need to not be afraid to be wrong. Do your best to be right, but then put out the content and just know that, some of the stuff you're going to put out is wrong, but it was right to the best of your knowledge.
Or you do a claiming before saying, hey, this is what I think, or this is the information given to me, hail the higher power on this.
I suppose. But it's just kind of funny that my thing about, don't be afraid, just do it, has been on the back burner for 4 different recordings.
Well, you know, do as I say, not as I do.
I suppose. Anyway, so yeah, their ghost show is really worth watching, both for the jokes they make as well as the information they bring forward. They're hilarious. If by chance they're listening, I do like the Hot Dogga Saga. Sorry, Ryan. You don't know what that is, do you?
No, I don't.
So they have an after show. Like, so there's the BuzzFeed after show.
Yeah.
Like
the Q&A.
The Q&A.
Yeah.
And at the end of the Q&A, they do an animated segment.
Got it.
Called Bun Solved. It's about a hot dog.
I'm so upset with myself right now.
They call it the Hot Dogga Saga.
Oh my gosh, I want them to do a crossover of Detective Popcorn, the Confessioner, and
they very
Hot
well
Dog
might
Detective.
Have. It's not a detective.
Hot Dog what?
They're on a space adventure that involves
either way, the Confessioner and Detective Popcorn would totally be in on that.
I think it would be hilarious, and I don't know if they already haven't done it, because I do have to say, even though I love the concept of the Hot Dogga Saga, I can't stomach it. I can't get all the way through it every time.
How so? What are the components that make you uncomfortable?
Well, it's uncomfortable is a bit harsh. I don't know. It's just kind of... It's a story. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'll miss parts of it because I won't watch that episode for whatever reason. Like, maybe I didn't see it or whatever. And
you constantly have YouTube on?
Yeah. Yeah. Dear listener, for those of you who care, during a 24-hour period, my average amount of YouTube watching is about 30 hours. So, we'll set that there for you.
Levels.
In fact, as we're recording this right now, we're watching YouTube.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's beside the point. So, Unsolved by BuzzFeed is fantastic, and Shane and Ryan are hilarious, and they're great. Watching their old stuff is good too, but they've definitely improved their stuff. I wish they would do more cryptids, but I understand that there's only so many cryptids, so they're trying to leave it to like 1 a season. Mm-hmm. This year they did Mothman, and it was perfect because...
They should have left Ryan on the road and just driven away and just have a video of him screaming, "No, don't leave me for the Mothman!"
I don't want to spoil the joke, but the point about Mothman... That episode, if you are a fan of BuzzFeed Unsolved, will come off as weird for a multitude of reasons. But all the reasons are explained through the legend of the Mothman. You just have to put 2 and 2 together. I don't want to spoil it, though. So, there's that.
I also like that we're talking only about crime podcasts right now that happen to have dark humor behind them as well, or just humor in general. Because if we were talking about other criminal podcasts like Criminal or, Serial. Serial.
Don't know either of these.
These are other podcasts that are the more serious. They usually have lawyers come on and people who went through the crime as well that are recalling their experiences.
Oh, gosh.
While the ones that we're talking about are people who have done research on the subject, may or may have not met anyone directly related to these incidents, usually not, and always care for the victim, of course, and just basically make fun of as much as they can the person who caused these horrible incidents.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the YouTubers I watch. His whole shtick is he makes fun of murderers and rapists and whatnot in order to make them famous for being stupid.
Yes.
With the intent of, unfortunately, with the way the news cycle works, these people who do these things often get remembered, or at least their name gets out there, and they become famous for what they did. And so his whole shtick is, well, okay, if you're going to be famous, the weird, messed up, funny stuff that you've done in your past needs to come to light too. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a question, because I think it's a question that needs to be asked, especially when it comes to true crime world. Do you think that these criminals should be given case numbers instead of being called by their actual name, because it would lessen the famousness of their crime and their name that's related to it?
So that's my knee jerk. That's what I want to say. but the answer is no.
Because society's not going to cling on to a number as fast as they are a name because it humanizes them.
No, because there's a lot of information that can be gathered from a name that would be covered up otherwise.
Got it.
So...
And you want to know what this person looks like, so if they're still out on the loose, you're able to protect yourself as well.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it as well.
So do you think that it's okay to start calling them by numbers after they've been put behind bars, and it's something where it's like, okay, they 100% did it, there's not even any kind of evidence that would lead to someone else?
Yes and no. Like, I'm okay with the news saying that, but it's not, it has to be hidden information. Their name has to be public information.
Okay. And that's just how the law works?
No, I just mean like that's the way the law should work.
Gotcha.
It doesn't work that in every way in every country.
Okay.
So,
I was just wondering because I've heard this idea on a couple of podcasting shows, and I'm trying to think about how you would deal with it, because it's just, I think it's easier to grab onto a name because that's a being rather than a number, because a number could be anything. It could be a file, it could be the number that your dog had before you adopted it from the pound.
So the phrase that I've heard, the way that I've heard of dealing with the situation that I actually like is having the news media just pick a name for the person. And I don't mean name like as in like just come up with a random name. What I mean is call them something that's not their actual name. So good examples of that are the Isla Vista shooter.
Okay. So what a cop or a person in the case would usually make it famous by their, the...
nickname.
And their nickname, yes, exactly. You would want them to go by that instead of their actual name.
Yep. And then another concept that I've heard a lot is in single murders or single rapes or single crimes, calling the name of the victim. So-and-so's murderer, rather than saying the name of the murderer.
I totally agree, because the murderer is the one who shouldn't be getting fame from it. It's being aware of the act and having empathy for the family that should follow instead.
Yeah, and, each case is an individual case.
Yes,
and,
of course. So it could be different.
But I just think it's important to not hide that information from the public. The name should be publicly available, just
especially
not publicly
when it comes
broadcast.
to safety, definitely. Yeah. So I think definitely their name should be attached at some point, but I think after that you kind of... Then again, it's one of those dual human nature things where they're still a human, and they're a human that still did those things. But I think that's another part of what makes them so scary, is that because they're human, you can relate to them in some way. And I think that makes it all the more scarier, because that's what the reality is.
The boogeyman is real.
Exactly. That's actually what I was telling the kids I was babysitting today. I said, do you think the boogeyman was named the boogeyman because he's crawling out of your brain and trying to scare you, and the only thing that's actually scaring you is your brain itself?
Except there sometimes is something in the dark.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I'm saying your brain makes it scarier than it probably is.
True.
Because the thing in the closet could be a hanger that's fallen down by accident.
Yes.
Or the hamster that got out of the cage 2 weeks ago, and suddenly you're hearing scurrying in your room.
But sometimes there's a robber in the house.
Yes. And that's when you work off of your gut, and you do what needs to be done to protect yourself and your children.
Speaking of which, a good creepy YouTuber to watch this time of year, Top Fives.
Really?
Yeah.
That's his channel's name?
Yep, Top Fives.
Top Fives, okay.
Yeah, like TOP5, the number 5S. Top Fives. He has a melodic voice and very kind of high pitched. You'll know it when you see it. But he mostly talks about like top 5 strange disappearances, or top 5 murders that involve food, or top 5 murders that involve a freezer, or top 5 murders that happened in towns that start with A.
Wow. Well, at least you get a full range, so it's not like, oh, here's the top 10 murders that we're just going to talk about again consistently.
Yeah, he's really good at bringing things to light that you like otherwise wouldn't think of. He also does a bunch of like cryptozoological stuff, ghost stuff, alien stuff. So he's the perfect thing to listen to this time of
Hoo-hoo stuff?
year. No. Not yet. No. We'll make the legend of the hoo-hoo known once we report our research.
And once again, the hoo-hoo is not a vagina ghost, correct?
Yes.
Okay, because that would also be an appropriate name for a vagina ghost, just saying.
I suppose.
It's on record.
I suppose. I'm trying to think there's another YouTuber that's worth listening to that's spooky, but
I mean, if you're scared of reality, Salmonella Academy.
That's not spooky.
I mean, when you think of a man that's actually eating babies, I think that's pretty scary.
I suppose you're right, but have you seen his most recent video?
Which one?
About Dancer.
Yes.
Are we human? Are
yes.
we Dancer?
Yes. Are we human or are we Dancer?
Oh, God, I love that.
Can you answer that, listener?
Anyway, I think we're getting too far off into the reeds, so until next time, dear listener, see you.
Goodbye.
Out there.